Mark Calloway here, and in this session we'll take a look at Revit 2025 and some of the new features that are now available. So before we get going, the outline for this session, first of all we'll take a look at what's new. So this is straight off the Autodesk website. You can access this yourselves, but we'll take a look at the main new features that Autodesk are kind of promoting on there. There's a lot of other features as well, some not quite so big. So if we have a look through some of the minor features, as if we want to call them minor features, and some of the logs, as well as to what's in there, there's a few worthy mentions. So again, I'll point out some of these on here, but we won't be going into detail on those. They're just simply worth pointing out, but not showing off. And then we'll jump into Revit 2025. And we'll have a bit of a demonstration on some of the new features. So I've had a look through what's available. There's a few ones in there that are worth showing off. So we'll take a look at those in Revit 2025. So let's take a look at what's new. So again, this is straight off of the Autodesk website. And this covers 3 slides. I won't going to squeeze them all into one slide deck. You probably won't be able to see them if I did that. So first of all, Topo Solids. So Topo Solids were added in Revit 2024 and are getting a lot of attention at the moment from Autodesk. So there's a number of enhancements on that front. So some improvements, for example, on object hosting to Topo Solids, particularly with railings, for example. So maybe we'll do an example there when we jump into Revit. And also with objects cutting into Topo Solid. So there's a few things there. So voids such as shafts, for example, will now cut into Topo Solids. And also certain elements as well, such as floors and roofs, they will also cut out of Topo Solids as well, or excavate is the word that's being used there. And because they excavate from the Topo Solid, it'll also tell us how much material has been excavated as well. So if we have a car park, for example, and instead of cutting out the terrain, we just use the floor tool to generate the tarmac surface, and we drop that into the Topo Solid. That's going to excavate the material out required for the floor and above the floor. And it's going to give us a value for roughly how much material was removed there. Also on the front of family creation, arrays will now allow us to have a value of 1 and 0. I think this is quite a big feature to have. Family editing usually doesn't get a lot of new functionality in there, but with arrays, it's always been a bit of an issue that you kind of have to have an array of at least 2 or more in a family. And you couldn't have a single object, for example. But with this update, we can now have arrays and we can give them values of 1 and we can give them values of 0 as well. There were a few workarounds, but I think this is a nice new feature to have on the family creation front. Background exports to PDF. Again, not one of the ones you're going to get fireworks out for. But if you're exporting to PDFs and you've got those few extra seconds to wait, or minutes, depending on your computer and what you're exporting, being able to hit the export button and then just carry on working is a nice feature to have. It's not going to change how you work. It's not going to look very pretty and all that sort of stuff, but it's a quality of life improvement, I think is the word I'm looking for there. Walls. So create walls with auto join and lock. So this probably isn't what you're thinking at the moment. So walls already join within Revit if you want them to. What this kind of does is, and I'm thinking of a scenario in my head. So you've got a wall and you want to put some tiles on that wall, and maybe the tiles are only going to be half the height of the wall, so you're going to have the bottom half of a room tiled, and then maybe you're going to paint the top half or something like that. So what we can do there is we can have our original wall, and then we can create a second wall type that's just purely the layer for the wall tiles, and then we draw that in front of the original wall, the first wall. With this feature, the two walls will join together. They're still two independent walls. You can modify them independently. They are two separate wall types, and they can be scheduled as two separate wall types. But for behavioral purposes, Revit's going to join those together. And this is really useful for when you add in elements such as doors or openings or windows, something that's going to cut through the wall. Previously, if you added a door to a wall, it would cut through the main wall, but it wouldn't cut through the tiles. And with a frame as well, it could get a little messy, and you had to do a bit of modeling around that. But that's all changed with this update in 2025. So Revit will auto join the two walls, so for behavioral purposes, it will make your life a lot easier. We'll definitely take a look at that when we jump into Revit. Moving on to the next page, we have sheet collections. So we can kind of already organize stuff in the browser with our browser organization and filtering, but we can now also create collections in the browser organization, and we can add sheets into that in addition to the browser organization. Again, we'll take a look at that inside Revit, and it might make a bit more sense when we do. Alignment of text, keynotes, and tags. So again, another quality of life improvement, and one that's I think a lot of people will appreciate. So when you're detailing up a drawing and you add in all your tags and notes and stuff into there, getting them all nicely aligned can be a bit of a process. So we can now align those within Revit. Within Revit 2025, we do get a number of alignment options. We can align them justified left, to the right, central, across the top, so on and so forth. So we've got a number of options there in how we want them aligned, but the process is just so much more easier. So again, we'll take a look at that once we jump into Revit. IFC export category mapping template. So we can now create templates for our IFC category mappings. One we won't go into today, but again, I'm sure that'll be very useful for a lot of people out there. Coordination model changes. Again, we won't go through this one because it's more to do with the Autodesk Construction Cloud side of things with your Revit projects than inside Revit. But again, a nice new feature there that if you're using the Construction Cloud is well worth taking advantage of. And if you're not using the Autodesk Construction Cloud, then definitely check that out. And on the final page of the main new updates off the Autodesk website, edit part types geometry for MEP fabrication data manager. If you're using that, again, it's well worth taking a look at that. Analytical duct and pipe segments. Again, if you're using the analytical side of Revit, well worth looking into that. If you're drawing rebars, modeling rebars within Revit, so we have improved control of annotations in bending details, and we have now parametric splicing for rebar as well. A few worthy mentions, so these aren't the key features that Autodesk are pushing out on there, but they're certainly well worth noting. So we now have improvements to step file imports into Revit. So Revit's been able to, Revit can import step files. Sometimes it was quirky, to say the least. So there's improvements on that front there. So if you're importing step files into Revit, and if you are, you probably know what I mean. there's improvements, so it should make your life a little easier. The new Revit home screen. Some of you might have seen this in Revit 2024. I think it was added as part of a service pack fairly recently. This is now part of Revit 2025. There's not much there on the new Revit home screen. You do have the option of the original Revit home screen and the new Revit home screen. This kind of jumped out at me as watch this space. I'd be tempted to say that we'll probably see more features added to the Revit home screen, and this is just the start of things to come. But it's well worth noting that that's there, and to keep an eye out for any changes on that. Material browser improvements, particularly around rendering of previews of materials. So if you're working with materials within Revit, it's well worth checking that one out. Search in the project browser enhancement. So, yep, we can search the project browser. The experience has been improved. It wasn't terrible before, but this kind of just makes things a bit easier, particularly when you're filtering and how all the different nodes expand and get into the results that you're wanting to look for. So worth checking that one out. Filter discipline updates. So if you're using, for example, the visibility graphics override, you're turning categories on and off, you're turning your furniture off, you're turning doors and windows on, you want to see your ducting, your pipes, your pipe fittings, you've got all those different categories that you turn on, turn off, you make them half-tone, you change the colour of. At the top of that list, you've got the filter categories, so you can filter the list because it can be quite a long list between architectural and MEP and systems and so on. That's been updated. So some of the categories have kind of changed around. So some categories are in multiple categories. So it might appear under architectural and it might appear under structural when you filter the list. So a few categories have moved around, so just be aware of that. You can go onto the Autodesk website and get a full list of what categories moved where, what it's no longer in, what it's now in. Is it in more than one category? But just be aware of that. Disabled MEP mark number auto generation. So certain MEP categories automatically generated a mark number, whether you wanted it to or not. That's now being disabled. You can still use mark numbers like any other component, but it will now no longer do that automatically. So a few worthy mentions there, and there's a lot more to the 2025 features list, but these are kind of just the key ones that we've that are worth mentioning there. But feel free to go onto the Autodesk website and take a full look through what's new. So what we'll do next is we'll jump into Revit 2025. Out of everything that I've ran through there, there's a few notable features that are well worth taking a look at. Some of them might need a little bit further explanation. So again, I'll quickly show off some of those features, but we don't have time to go through everything there. So we'll just take a look at a select few. Okay. So we're inside a Revit project, Revit 2025. This is just a demo model that I have available here. We'll take a look at some of the features that are new to Revit 2025. So I just want to get a couple of user interface changes out of the way before we start going into some of the fancier stuff. So first of all, if I just go to the Modify tab, start the Scale command, I'm just going to pick a random object within Revit. There's been a few changes with a few commands. So we have our options bar here. We have usually have a number of toggles on there. Some of these have moved. So Autodesk is trying to standardize the location of where some of these settings are. So there used to be an option here for the scale, whether you wanted to graphically or numerically specify the scale. they've now moved to the ribbon bar. So we now have this new group called Scale, and we have the same two options that were on the options bar, now on the ribbon bar here. Now, depending on what the setting is, sometimes it'll now be on the ribbon bar, and sometimes it's now in the properties window. So just be aware if you're having a look at some tools that you've used before and the settings disappeared on the options bar, it'll either be on the ribbon bar or it'll be in the properties window here. And that's just Autodesk moving to standardize where the settings are located. Also, as mentioned when I was quickly running through the slide deck at the beginning, if I go into my visibility graphics overrides, we have this filter list here for the discipline. So these categories down here, we can change what's visible by turning these on and off. Okay, so the categories that fall under these different disciplines have changed slightly. So if you were to, for example, turn everything off but architecture and you can't find what you're looking for, it might now be under one of these. Or you might find that something that wasn't under architecture is now under architecture. So we'll take a look at the sheet collections. So we have our project browser down here on the left-hand side. We can manage all our views, legends, schedules, and our sheets. Now, again, we can organize this using the browser organization. We can, let's just pick on one. Let's go with that. There we go. We can filter out sheets. We can group and sort them into a hierarchy. But what we can now do is if I right-click on the heading Sheets, we now have this new sheet collection. It just adds a new top level into here. Default name's collection 1, but you can rename that to something more sensible should you wish. And it's just a more manual but more controlled way of grouping sheets together. And you just drag and drop them into this new collection here. So I'm just going to left click and hold down and drag that, let go, and that's now inside collection 1 there. I can move multiple sheets into that collection. If I right click on the collection, you won't be able to delete it whilst it's got any sheets in there. So all you have to do is move them out. So again, I'm just going to drag those under the heading Sheets. There we go. The collection's now empty, and I can delete that. So it's just another option in being able to organize your sheets. It's a manual process. There's no rules there in what sheets are going to be automatically added or not. Just drag and drop into the collection the sheets that you want to be in there. We can export to PDF in the background now. So either using the shortcut on the quick access toolbar at the top for PDF export, or if we go File and Export, you've got the option here for PDF, that's all the same. What's now new is this export in the background tick box. So do remember to turn that on, otherwise it will export your PDF still, but you'll have to wait whilst Revit processes that before you can do anything else. So I'm going to turn that on, and I'm then going to choose what views I want to export. I've got a few selected there. Hit the export button. I'm going to overwrite the file that's there, and that should process in the background. There we go. So we can see that running away in the background there, and I can now start working on whatever it is I need to be getting on with. That might only save me a few seconds, it might save me a few minutes. If it's a lot, it might save you a lot of time. But tick that, and seconds add up, don't they? Okay, so we'll have a look at some of the more modeling related stuff. So we'll have a look at this family array option. I'm just going to jump into a floor plan. Bathroom here, got 2 sinks. Maybe I want that family to be an arrayed family, so I can choose whether there's just 1 sink, 2 sinks, and if it's like a public toilet, there might be 4 or 5 sinks. So let's delete one of these because we're only going to need 1 sink family here. I'm going to select the sink, I'm going to edit the family. Jump in a floor plan view, there's the sink. I'm going to array the sink. I'm just going to pick a start point and then a sensible distance, 700 mils. I'm going to place the second sink. That's now an array. I can select either of those, I can select the number for the array and I can change that to 3 and it'll stick a third sink on there, so on and so forth. What I can do now, which we couldn't do before, is have a value of 1. Within the family, that second sink is now grayed out, so it still indicates that it's an array, but we've only got the 1 sink modelled. I can also set it to 0, and again I can see sink 1 and 2, but they're both grayed out, so they're not modelled anymore. If you're wondering why it grays them out, well, if you had an array of 0, you still want to be able to select the sink so you can access the settings here. For example, we don't want 30. There we go. So what I'll do is I'm going to select this array here. Let's add a parameter to control that, and we'll just call it something simple as number of sinks. Let's make it an instance parameter. There we go. So we've now got a parameter. It should be somewhere. Let's have a look. I'm going to have to look close at my screen. If anyone can see, I'm sure you're screaming at your screen saying it's there, it's there. Let's have a look. Number of sinks. There we go. Okay, so I can change that to 2. I'll update the number of sinks. Let's load that into the project. There we go. So we now have an array family. I can select that. It was an instance property, so it should appear in the properties window. I should have looked at what heading it was under. There we go. Number of sinks. I can change that to 3. I can now have 3 sinks. Change it to 1. Got 1 sink. But I now have the ability to do that with this family, which before 2 sinks would be the minimum. But if you ever had that scenario where you just needed the 1, instead of having 2 families, one where it's just an individual sink and then another family where you've got the array. Okay. Wall auto joins and locks. So this was the tile scenario that I mentioned previously. So we have a bathroom here. I think the wall face is already tiled on this, but we'll go with it. So what I can now do is, and let's duplicate a wall. We need to make a new wall type. Doesn't matter which one we go with. Duplicate, and let's call it tiles. There we go. We'll edit the structure. Remove all the layers we don't need. Thickness, 12 mils. Material, wall tiles. There we go. Color, we'll leave it as it is. I won't refine it too much. There we go. A simple wall without tiles. So what we can do is change the location line. So finish face, interior. We don't need a base offset. Oops. Okay, we won't mess with that. Let's make it unconnected. And we'll go with 1500. And it only goes partway up the wall. So I should be able to draw that on the wall face here. I think it's the wrong way around. Let's flip that. There we go. So we have our wall of tiles against this wall. And what we'll do is we'll open up a 3D view as well. We'll clear some of the clutter. So if I select the tiled wall, we'll select that wall there. We'll get that open up in a 3D section, and we can see the new tiled wall that we've made there. So maybe I want to continue that all the way down this wall here, including where this door is. Let's do that. I'm going to continue it down there. Now where the door is, I would annoyingly either have to have two walls or cut some sort of opening in the tiles there for the door. What we should now be able to do is, if I use the join tool, is I can join the wall that's just tiles with this internal wall here, and you can already see it. The door opening has just continued through the tiled walls. So there's still two individual walls. Just go back to floor plan. I can select that wall. I can select that wall. But as far as this door's concerned, it's one wall, and the opening is going to go all the way through. If I remove the door, the tiles will reappear there because I've not manually created an opening. It's part of the door family. And if I put a door back in, it's going to recreate that opening again. Okay. So moving on, because we do have a limited amount of time, we'll have a look at some new wrap conditions for walls as well. So for this example, I'm just going to generate a small length of wall outside the building here. So at the moment, none of the layers wrap around the end of the wall. All the internal layers go all the way to the end. Now, if we edit the type settings for this wall, and this bit isn't new, we have the wrappings at the end. Let's turn on exterior. Where's it gone? The exterior layers now wrap around the end. Again, nothing new there. But what is new are these little toggles at each end. So I might not want it to wrap around in every scenario. This wrap setting is a type setting, which is going to affect all walls of this type. But you might have just one or two instances where you don't want that to happen. I can now use these toggles on the end for any scenario where I don't want the ends to wrap, or vice versa, where you do want it to wrap. So we can now individually control each end using the little toggles as to whether the wrap conditions will be applied. Okay, and we'll delete that. Let's reset this 3D view. There we go. So the next thing we'll have a look at is the Topo Solids enhancements. So, as mentioned, voids such as a shaft will now cut through Topo Solids, and certain elements like floors and roofs will also cut through Topo Solids. Now, just to point out that if you have an older model where you generated a topo surface and you've upgraded that model to 2025, you can at any time select that topo solid or topo surface and convert it to a topo solid. Now we'll see how this works. Not the most amazing model for working with, but we'll go with the flow. I'll start a new project if we need to. So we now have our topo solid. If I can select that and just confirm topo solid, what we can now do is select the floor command. Let's just pick something a bit generic, concrete there. And then I'm just going to draw the boundary. So maybe once we come down this ramp, there's some sort of concrete path or area. Let's just very crudely, and I'm just going to come out of the topo area. There we go. Very crude, it'll do the job. confirm that, and we now have our floor inside the topo surface, so we can see that there. I want to excavate the dirt that this floor occupies, down to the depth that this floor is. If I select my topo solid, and was that a topo surface still there? There might still be a topo surface there. Topography. Yeah, let's just remove that for this example. If I select my topo solid, we now have this excavate tool. I can then, with the excavate tool, choose a suitable object, such as a floor or a roof, to have the topo solid excavated for. So now my floor cuts through the topo solid and removes any dirt that it occupies and above as well. So you can see that we have our floor and it's taken out whatever the floor occupies and a couple of inches above there as well. Same as well for shafts. So if I select the shaft opening here, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle that overlays the topo solid and the floor. It should cut through both. Select that. And we can see that there going through both elements, and it will now cut them both out. It will cut the floor and it will cut the topo solid. Now what we'll do is we'll have it not cut quite all the way through, and we'll have a look at railings on topo surfaces. So what we'll do is go to the architecture tab, railing command, sketch a path, and I'm going to place this along the edge of the topo surface there, or topo solid. Okay. Yeah, that's not generated how I wanted. Let's go with that one. There we go. I'm going to pick a host for this railing, and I'm going to select the topo solid. So that railing is now hosted on it. And then at some point between where the elevation of the topo solid is, I'm going to break the line. So I'm just going to select the railing again, edit path. I'm going to split the line. This is very crude, by the way. I'm going to click there, I'm going to click there, so that the railing can change elevation at those split points. You have to split the railing, otherwise it will just all remain at one elevation. There we go. Now that we've done that, we should find, it's a bit crude. Has it done it? Kind of, it's not amazing, is it? Let's try that one again. I'll give it one more go. I could have done with it. Let's jump in a new file actually. New project. Architectural template. Let's make a new topo solid from scratch. Topo solid. There we go. Something like that maybe. There we go. So let's stick a shaft on there. Let's make it a bit deeper this time. We didn't have much depth to work with there. It was very hard to see. So railing, I'm going to go straight over that there. We'll host it to the topo surface. But as you can see, it just goes straight over the top of that hole there. And then if we break the path, somewhere around there, somewhere around there. And this is the thing with live demonstrations. Let's pick new host again. Is it going to do it? You have to love railings, don't you? Anyway, we're a little tight on time, so you can take my word for that. But have a play around with hosting elements on top of surfaces. Railings are really not the best thing to work with on a live demonstration. Anyone who works with railings will know exactly what I mean. Okay, so let's close this project down there and return back to the first one. So 2 more things that we'll cover in the time that I've got left. So next thing we'll have a look at is aligning the tags and text notes. So let's get ourselves into let's go into do we have a section? Roof edge section. There we go. Okay, this is looking fairly aligned anyhow, but we'll go with it. So if I select these 3 tags here, we have these align options now. So at present, they're aligned left. I could choose aligned right, and it's now going to move them to align them to the right. I can align center, and I can put them back to being aligned left. Now looking a bit further down, we have some tags here. Now I want the ones on the left-hand side to line up with the ones on the right-hand side. So I can select this plaster and this air here, and then I can choose to align them in the middle horizontally. And then I can do the same with these 2 here as well. And that's going to adjust those so that horizontally they're now aligned, which is a lot easier than it was before. So you've got these new alignment options for aligning multiple tags. Same with text. If you were working with text and trying to get them aligned, you'll know how much this will make your life easier there. So we have those as well now in Revit 2025. And then the very last thing that we have is we can now export to step. So we could import before, and that's been improved in Revit 2025. So hopefully importing your step files into Revit, if you're doing that, will now be a much more pleasant and smoother process. But you now have the option to export step files as well. So should you have the need, you now have that option there as well. I won't go through the process of exporting that here live, but just so you're aware, you do now have the ability to export to a step file. Okay, and we'll leave that there for now. Again, jump onto the Autodesk website, have a look at the new features that are on there. These are just a few that I've handpicked to show you on this demonstration. There's a lot of enhancements in Revit 2025. So not new buttons to be clicking per se, but a lot of stuff's been improved and workflows made easier for you. So go check those out. And thank you for watching.